But kicking off the show with me this morning, friend of the program, friend of mine, New Orleans Saints beat writer. Many of you got to know him back when he was in this area as a beat writer covering the Ragin' Cajuns. He's a veteran, originally from Wisconsin, but he likes to call Louisiana home. Luke Johnson kicks off the show with us this morning. Good morning, Luke. How's life, brother?
Man, it's going great over here, Scott. I'm glad to hear it's going great for you over there, although I'm sad for the listeners of Lafayette. They don't get to hear your dulcet tones every morning now.
Dulcet tones. I haven't heard that yet. I appreciate that, Luke. Non like Saints question. This is more of I guess a radio guy question to a writer. Like as a beat writer, especially one for an NFL team. I mean, you guys kind of get hit up a lot for different interviews. I mean, I get hit up a little bit sometimes from people I don't know. You know, we host a podcast in this place about the Sun Belt or about the Saints or about the Pelicans. You know, could you come on? You know, and we're in Iowa, and I'm always happy to do it. Of course, that doesn't happen often. You know, I imagine for you guys, it happens a lot. And sometimes, you know, a guy just wants to fill time, and other times, you know, it's a good interview. My question is, like, what do you writers, you sports journalists behind closed doors actually like think about the radio guys? Do y'all kind of roll your eyes? Or you like, man, like again, this guy won't leave? Like, is it annoying? Just be honest here.
Yeah. Okay. So full brutal truth here. Most of the time I do just roll my eyes every time I get a text and say like, come on, man. You know, like I've got 30 people asking for 15 free minutes of my time this week.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. And honestly, most of the time I say no. But that's because I usually, like, the nice thing about this though is like I get to work with a lot of people who become friends. You know, you, Dave Schultz. I got to know Ben Love really well, and Hunt Palmer and Baton Rouge, and I just. You know, I carve out time for my friends.
You do it long enough, and it's like, you know, I'll go on with you, but if I don't know you, I'm busy. And that's not even to say that you're not busy. I mean, you are, but like that's a lot of requests.
Yeah, you know, and like obviously, like if somebody with a really big platform wants me to come on, then yeah,
sure.
You know, if it's
Dan,
like,
Dan Patrick show,
career-wise, it makes sense. But like, you know, I've got just some schmuck with some podcasts that I've never heard of that frankly few people have heard of, and I'm just like, look, I don't have that much time. Like especially during a season. I mean, my time is really, really valuable to me because it's just I'm working 7 days a week, and it's usually a sort of thing where I'm like up and at it by like 8 a.m. and I'm sometimes not finishing until like 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So it's like I can't just give all of my time away. But there are people I make exceptions for, and it's definitely I think that's the way to go.
I appreciate it.
I end up talking to a lot of local people that way. So
I like. In doing this as long as I have, I think anyone that's listened to me for a long time would probably agree. The thing I think I'm not great at is always like ending a call because I'm like telling, not with a listener, and sometimes a listener, but like when it's a guest like you or someone, because like I'm very appreciative of their time. And so I'm trying to like tell them how grateful I am knowing, okay, I'm just about to hang up on them too. It's like, you don't find yourself in that situation when you're just like on the phone with like someone that's helping you with your car or your house or maybe right. It's a love. But when you're on the radio and it's live, it's just, man, I really appreciate. Really, you should just be like, okay, bye, thanks, and you hang up. But like I always struggle with that because I want to keep saying thank you because I know I'm just about to hang up on them. It's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. And honestly, like sometimes when you get the all right, thanks, and then like the line just goes dead, like that does feel a little abrupt.
I know. That's I go on friends of mine shows, and it's just like, all right, Scott, thanks, man. Okay, go, click. Like, all right, I get that. That's it.
But at the same time, you're right. I do think that it's not like when I come out, like usually we're on the phone together for, I don't know, 30 minutes or so whenever I come on your show.
Yeah, we get a little long-winded. We start talking about shows and other things, but that's okay.
But that always just feels like I'm just talking like a friend. Like it's a little bit different because your format, Scott, is not. It's not like other shows. So,
right. Luke, I just bring you on. We got Luke Johnson. He is from the Advocate. Luke, man, what's wrong with the Saints? Go. That's. I'm like, I want to have conversations. I don't want to just be like, Luke, man. I mean, what do what do the Saints need to do, man? They suck this year. What do they need to do to be good? Go.
Yeah. That's the way it goes, though.
All right. I'm going to ask you some actual Saints questions, everybody. Luke Johnson's our guest at By Luke Johnson. And I want to defend you guys, too. It's hard to say yes to everyone. You can reach a point in your career where, you don't have a lot of time. There are only some platforms you want to utilize. And it's at the same time, I know there's a part of you that's like, man, it's some young cat, he's just trying to make it, and and at the same time I want to help him, but I don't really have the time, and I can, maybe I can send him to someone else. I think that's a good thing to do once you've been in it long enough. Someone that's sort of younger in your profession that's maybe eager to just talk, and you just pass the number along to them. Like that always works too. It's a kind of a way of like not being like, not coming off as a jerk, not to say that by saying no you are, absolutely not, but by kind of just spreading the love and giving yourself, that time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I do that a lot. Now sometimes I do it to other friends who I know are also busy, just as as a joke.
I love it. Oh, who would love to talk to you, my guy?
Exactly.
My guy with, 3 followers and a podcast that, God bless him, his mom listens to. I mean, he's just trying to start. So, you try. I mean, we were all there once.
I appreciate that hustle. Like, yeah, absolutely. I was, at one point I was working for the Reveille covering, like men's golf. Nobody was reading anything I was writing. I'm sure nobody wanted to talk to me when I was a young reporter, so I totally get it.
Yeah.
But I also just knowing that I do get inundated with requests, especially during the season. It's more often than not, I'm saying no than yes.
Luke Johnson, our guest, 103.3 The GOAT simulcast on 1420. There's this, I think there's a fine line between, bringing on a guest and trying to help your show, but also promote them. And excuse me, a host that just kind of goes through the motions and is just asking people they don't know to come on to fill time. Like I say, there's a fine line. No, there's a very definitive line. Like it's pretty obvious. And, I think when you bring someone on, they're giving you their time. You want to promote their stuff. And I always try to bring people on that I find interesting, that I find are talented. And at the same time, if I bring someone on and it's just not a good interview, I can tell they don't want to be there. I usually don't ask them back. It's no hard feelings. It's just there's a give and take to it. And it always kind of annoys me when I hear someone in radio that's clearly just like using, I say you guys, it could be anyone in the sports media world, but just taking your time for granted as if like they're owed it or something. It's just a little pet peeve of mine is all.
Well, I appreciate that, Scott. But look, I just think that you have never been like that, and that's I think why it's. It's not always an automatic yes. Sometimes I do have stuff going on, but yeah, I'm like 95% of the time like available to come on your show.
Well, next time I bother you, it'll just be to like grab a po' boy. It won't be to come on the radio, so it'll be a little easier.
Yeah, you know it, man.
All right, Luke Johnson.
New Orleans are back there, Lafayette.
You know it. By Luke Johnson, BY Luke Johnson on Twitter. Luke, let's talk a little Saints. So I'm going to ask you. I know you wrote yesterday about the new DC. I want to take a minute to talk about Zach Strief for a moment because a thought came to me this morning when I was walking my dog. I was just kind of thinking about the show and a few topics, and I know Zach Strief is going to Denver. He's going to coach with Sean Payton, and he's been, a Midwest guy that's been in New Orleans for so long since he got drafted back in 2006 and was a player, and then everyone knows he was the play-by-play guy, and then he joined the coaching staff. And now, he's going to Denver. He gets promoted. He gets a chance to sort of move up in the coaching world. Wouldn't it be almost apropos, Luke, if at some point, I'm not talking about next year, but if at some point Zach Strief was the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, like he would do something that I assume is I'm sure there's been like a former head coach that became like a color analyst. I promise you there has never been an NFL player that was on a team, was a captain, then was the play-by-play guy on the home radio call, and then at one point was the head coach of the team. I think he's just trying to do something that's never been done before. I don't know if his sights are set on being a future Saints coach, but there's something that would feel kind of apropos about it as he continues to kind of climb that ladder as a coach.
That's the football EGOT. That's what he's going for. I haven't thought about it until now, but I do think that's a really interesting thing. I think Zach has head coach material written all over him. Absolutely, he's really intelligent. He really, really, really knows how to communicate with his people, and he knows the game. I know people were upset yesterday when the news came out because the coaching news this offseason has not been great.
Right.
Just on its face, you lose both of you guys who were co-defensive coordinators, and that's the one side of the ball where they were pretty good last year. I think people were not happy. They decided to retain Pete Carmichael. Now you add Zach Strief to this. Obviously he's a really familiar face around here. People have gotten to know him for a long time. They were listening to him. They were watching him play. I don't think people really, really truly know. If you're just talking about the average fan, whether or not he's a good coach because he's an assistant to an assistant.
Sure.
But he's a name. He's a name everybody recognizes. But I think, the problem with having good coaches is they get taken away by other teams, for promotions. That's exactly what he's getting, and he deserves it. And the Saints had no way to promote him. They weren't going to make him the offensive coordinator. They have a offensive line coach already. They had a vacancy of the tight ends coach, but I don't know if Strief is going to coach them right now. I think they had no way of really keeping him on the staff. I'm sure they would have loved to have kept him on the staff, but at some point, good coaches are going to end up coaching elsewhere. They're not going to coach in one place for 30 years. That said, I think it'd be really interesting if someday he does come back, because you're right. There's no way. I think it's already probably unlikely there's a player who spent a dozen years with the team, then was the play-by-play guy, then went right into coaching for the team. That's a pretty incredible career arc right there.
It's already unprecedented, and look, like you said, we don't really know if he's really good or not as a coach. He seems to have done well at everything he's tried at. He's overcome odds. 7th round pick. He's gonna have trouble making the team. He gets his first start against Tampa Bay. Simeon Rice is standing across from him. He's also got a club on his hand, and he has a great game. And then, works his way eventually into the starting lineup after a few years, is a captain, is part of a Super Bowl team, and then play-by-play. It's like, wait, what? That's never happened. And now at only 39, just moving on to his next coaching job. But if you want to move up in the coaching world, that's something that you have to do. You're probably not going to stay at the same place for a while. So, I don't know, 10, 12 years down the road, 15, whenever it might be, if he's ever the head coach of the Saints. We know Gale in the Saints front office likes him a lot. So I'm going to always be following his coaching career, because if he ever gets elevated to like a coordinator, I feel like it's only a matter of time before he ends up back in New Orleans. And, I don't know if anyone else has had the thought, but it came to me this morning. Let's talk about some other You mentioned all the coaching, all the coaching news. Joe Woods, new D coordinator. He was fired by, Cleveland, and I had somebody, email me all this stuff about him. Like, clearly all they had done was read his Wikipedia page, which, to be honest, was about all I had done, like, when I first heard the news. I didn't know much about him. I've kind of looked back at his resume since they hired him, and, really good DB coach before he became the D coordinator in Cleveland. A lot of success in Denver, a lot of success in San Francisco. But ultimately, I feel like, Luke, after, Nielsen and Chris Richard left, it was going to be hard to find a D coordinator that wasn't perhaps fired or wasn't being elevated from a positional group role, because they know that when they go to New Orleans, Dennis Allen is going to be really the guy running the defense. So with that, do you feel like overall, all things considered, based on who left, that Joe Woods was, I guess, just a hire that makes sense? I mean, I know Saints fans want to have a strong opinion about everything. I had trouble having a really strong opinion about Joe Woods, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I was even wondering after they let Richard go, if they were even going to hire a defensive coordinator. And look, I get Saints fans' frustration with what happened last season, and I am in no way trying to say like everything's going to be fine, because they have a lot of work to do to kind of get back in everybody's good graces. But I do think there's just some real overreaction to some of these moves. I mean, look, they're not going to get Steve Wilkes to come in and basically be like an assistant coach, right? I mean, that's basically what their defensive coordinator is right now, because they're not a play caller. There's a reason Ryan Nielsen's been trying to go somewhere else for a couple of years. He's wanted to level up. Nobody wants to come into a defensive coordinator role in title only. Like nobody with real career aspirations, right? I'm not saying Joe Woods doesn't have real career aspirations, but he's just coming off of getting fired by Cleveland as their defensive coordinator. So, like, I think that's the realistic thing to look at here, is that they're unless they're hiring some young up and comer who's really on nobody's radar. I think it makes sense to find an experienced coach, one who's who's had a lot of success in terms of designing pass defenses. Cleveland had a top 5 pass defense each of the last 2 years. I think in his 5 years as defensive coordinator, his teams have finished top 5 overall defense twice. I think he's a good coach. He's an experienced coach. He's somebody who's been on Dennis Allen's staff before, even though it was brief. I don't see anything wrong with it. Now that there's plenty of time for people to find things wrong with it if they get off to a slow start. But I just think that people have to be realistic with their expectations. The Saints are coming off a down year. They're not bringing anybody in who's going to have a lot of control in exactly what the defense looks like. That's Dennis Allen's. That's his unit. So they got to kind of deal with what they can get there.
Do you feel like perhaps there was I wasn't surprised Ryan Nielsen left. Same reason you mentioned, right? He wants to go cut his teeth, not be a co-coordinator, be a DC, and then they parted ways, with Chris Richard, or both sides agreed, whatever you want to read into it. From what I've understood and folks that I've talked to, it just seemed like there was not. It wasn't as fluid, perhaps, between the three of them. I'm talking about Dennis Allen, Nielsen, and Richard, as perhaps Allen wanted it to be. Was there maybe a little regret about having the co-coordinator thing? Because I always say that when you have co-coordinators, especially at a position like that, your head coach is calling the plays anyway, whether it be co-O coordinators, co-D coordinators, depending on what your head coach is. Was there maybe a little too many, not regret because they weren't trying to help those guys get another job. I think that's usually why you do the co-coordinator thing. But maybe a little regret that there were all the voices in the room kept things from running as smoothly as Dennis Allen perhaps thought that they were going to run.
Yeah, I mean, I think that should have been a concern right from the beginning. You know, if really the only point of doing the co-coordinator job is because, you know, they had two qualified guys and they couldn't pick between them, you know, and they want to give them both promotions and title. I mean, that doesn't really make any sense. Then all those people, whether it's Dennis or Ryan or Richard, they'll have, you know, at least something approaching an equal voice in a room, right? I just think that it never really made sense to me from the beginning. You know, even if Dennis was going to be the play caller and it was going to be his defense, it's like, what, you know, who are you really trying to serve here? Who are you trying to please? Because, you know, the end result was you know, nobody, I guess. I don't think anybody was really happy. You know, Nielsen obviously took the Falcons job, and you know, I think he's going to do a pretty good job there. I think he's a really good coach. And you know, I just think that from everything I heard about Richard, you know, that they weren't really happy with how things were going, even though they had the NFL's number 2 pass defense. That it was just you know, kind of a strained relationship with that whole staff and him, and maybe not the whole staff, but you know, organizationally with Chris Richard. So yeah, I just think it's the whole thing just felt off from the beginning. Nobody really knew, despite multiple attempts to explain it, what everybody was responsible for. So even though it's Dennis Allen's final call, you know, I think there's a little bit of confusion when you have, you know, that many people with that kind of title.
Luke Johnson, our guest, 103.3 The GOAT simulcast on 1420. It's the Great Scott Show. Last Saints thing for you. Derek Carr, you know, he was going to be a subject of conversation for Saints fans regardless. Should they trade? Should they not? I've always maintained, listen, you know, let it play out. If he's released, you know, offer him a deal. But breaking the bank for him, I mean, is he a guy that is he better than what you had this season? I think so. Is he a guy that's suddenly going to turn your whole fortunes around and fix every problem on the offense? Absolutely not. And so I think it's kind of like cautionary shopping, if you will. You don't want to just be reckless like you have all these gift cards. You want to be prudent. And I think by trading potentially a first-round pick late and all that other stuff, I don't see him going that route, Luke. But ultimately, you know, I'm sure you've been asked about Derek Carr from some of the radio hits you've done. It might just be like, Derek Carr, Luke, what's they going to do, man? They're going to get him or what? Go.
Well, okay, so I have a lot of different thoughts on this, honestly. So, one, I'm really interested to see how many teams are really talking to the Raiders at all about the trade. Because, look, I mean, $40 million guaranteed, you know, you're looking at a $35 million cap hit next year, and then north of 40 each of the 2 years after that for a 32-year-old quarterback who's, I think he's top 30 touchdowns once in his career. I mean, I don't know. That's the contract is the one thing that I think could scare a lot of teams off. But if the Saints really, really like Derek Carr, if they're desperate for him, and if other teams aren't in the mix for him for a trade, they'd rather just pursue him on the open market, because that does seem like the prudent thing to do, right? Then, yeah, I mean, maybe the Saints would be bidding against themselves here. Yeah, maybe you can trade a 6th-round pick for Derek Carr because the Raiders aren't going to get anything else otherwise. You know, I mean, I think that's really a realistic possibility. I don't think we have to talk about them giving up a 1 because Derek Carr kind of holds all the cards here. The Raiders are in a really bad position to negotiate. That said, if they do release him, and for your listeners, the deadline, I think it's February 15th. It's next Wednesday, I think. It's basically if they don't have a trade partner by then his $40 million in guarantees, they kick in, and then the Raiders are on the hook for that. So they're going to have a decision to make by then regardless. You know, if they don't have a trade partner, then they're almost definitely going to cut him rather than eat that salary. So So if they do cut him, which I think is probably a realistic possibility here, then I think it becomes really interesting because then you're competing against, I don't know, 7 or 8 teams that could use a quarterback, some of whom might be in better positions than you are, right? Like the 49ers have 2 quarterbacks on their roster who a lot of people like, in Brock Purdy and Trey Lance, and not a great injury outlook for either of those guys coming into next season. And they have a Super Bowl caliber team. Like maybe the 49ers would be like, hey, come here, win a Super Bowl. And, we'll pay you $20 million this year or whatever the case may be. Right? Are the Saints going to be able to compete against that? I mean, maybe. But there's so many teams out there with unsettled quarterback positions who could use a player like Derek Carr, and I don't know if you want to be competing against them if you're the Saints, because I don't know if your current assets line up as well as everybody else's do. So maybe they have to get aggressive and pull a trade if that's the guy they really want.
And then if you do that, right, you lock yourself into some guaranteed money there and some cap hits. And I know there, some you can always extend and convert into signing bonus and all that other stuff. But it does sort of lock you in financially to a spot. But to your point, I think if a trade for Derek Carr were to happen, it's going to be for like a late round pick, cash consideration, one of those things, not some highly sought out pick that, Raiders fans would make you think they're going to get for him. And so from a leverage standpoint, the Raiders don't really have much, but you just, I think, painted the scenario perfectly as to why the Saints might potentially pull the trigger on a trade based on what other teams are just to try to avoid the market buying him out. But how do they even feel about him overall? I don't know. I mean, he's a guy that's the ceiling is high, but he's there's been a lot of times where he's fallen well short of the ceiling, and there's been some inconsistency there. So it's definitely worth keeping an eye on.
He's also played on some bad Raiders teams too, right? But like it's like how much of that is the quarterback and how much of that is the team around him.
Yep.
I don't know. And so he's a really polarizing player. I'll tell you that. Like I've written about him a couple times now, and I've had some people in my email in my inbox just saying like, "Are you an idiot for writing about Derek Carr?" And other people be like, "They need to go out and get him." So I don't know. I think like with anything, unless they go out and get Lamar Jackson, I think there's going to be a mixed bag reaction from the Saints fan base. But look, they need to do something in a position. And I just think they got to be careful because Mickey Loomis is talking about managing the salary cap back to the middle, right? I don't think they want to just blow up their roster and get rid of all their expensive players and eat a massive cap hit tank and hope they can get Caleb Williams next year. Like I don't think that's their strategy, nor do I think it ever will be. But when you add a player who's going to cost you $120 million over 3 years, it requires you to move a lot of things around, and a lot of that money is going to be moved into future years. And all of a sudden it becomes a lot harder to manage a cap back to the middle if, like, just in order to get a player on your team this year, you have to restructure 10 guys and create, a bunch of money into void years, and that money's going to come back as dead money later on.
Right.
That's something they were dealing with last year. They were paying dead money out, like I think $25 million in dead money to Drew Brees and Teron Armstead, right? And this year, I mean, they're going to have another huge dead money bill if David Onyemata and Marcus Davenport go somewhere else. So, does it make sense to go out? I mean, you have to get a quarterback on this roster for sure, and I think you can't count on getting one in the draft because 29 is not an ideal place to pick a quarterback. But if you're trying to manage cap back to the middle, can you do that with a Derek Carr? Can you do it with a Lamar Jackson? Like if Lamar Jackson became available, the Saints would probably be like, hell yes, we want in on that.
Sure.
But can you actually manage a cap back to the middle when you're paying that guy $55 million
No,
a
you
year.
can't. You have to, convert into signing bonus and have Gail write a bunch of checks and keep pushing it back farther and farther and farther and convincing yourself that, well, the TV money for the next TV contract 10 years from now, that's whenever, I mean, if you can get LeBron, if you can get Lamar Jackson, you do whatever you have to do. Luke Johnson has been our guest. Great stuff. All right, man, before I let you run, any shows, any movies, you seen anything lately that you'd recommend?
Yes, I have. Well, first of all, Chelsea and I, before she left, we were talking off air before I got on. My wife just started a new job with Axios. She's in Washington, D.C. for their company retreat. But before she left for that, we watched the first episode of The Last of Us because everybody's talking about it. And yeah, I'm like really excited to keep that going.
I can't wait. I can't wait for that. But I'm also doing the thing that we've talked about. I'm like waiting till it airs. Like whenever there's like 2 episodes left, I'll like start 2 weeks before, so that way I like sync it up. And by the time I'm finally ready to watch the last episode, it's like premiering the next night.
Yeah. See, Chelsea and I were talking about doing that, but it's been such a part of the kind of cultural zeitgeist that we had to we had to start it up. And yeah, it was awesome. First episode was great. I think we finished The Bear recently.
Oh yeah, I've heard good stuff.
That was awesome. That was so good. I was a little skeptical going in, and I'm kind of blanking on the lead actor's name, but he was so good. There's one point in there where he just does like a 7-minute straight monologue. It was outstanding.
Jeremy Allen White, I think. Is that it?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I would highly recommend that one. It was. I've never worked in the service industry. I've never worked in the kitchen, but I have a lot of friends who have and currently do, and they say it's a like spot on, accurate representation of that. Let's see,
All right. I mean,
kind of blanking on the rest. Those are right now.
Those are getting plenty of love. I'm going to try my best to hold off on The Last of Us, but I tried it with the Game of Thrones spinoff, and I lasted a few weeks, and then I just started watching it like 3 weeks in, and quickly caught up, and then had to wait week to week. And other than that, man, I don't know. I watched Under the Banner of Heaven, which was Andrew Garfield was great in it. It was a tough watch at times. It was based on some true events, but it's on Hulu if you want to check it out. There's a little history there. I don't need to rehash it on the air with everybody because I don't need to keep you any longer than I already have, man. But Luke, brother, I appreciate you spending so much time over the years coming on the show. It's always fun talking, back in the day Cajuns. It's fun talking. Then you were in LSU. We were talking LSU baseball, and then you're on the Saints beat, and we, of course, talk Saints. And we've always talked sort of war movies and TV shows and stuff like that. And I just appreciate you and, the work that you do and your wife does, and wishing you nothing but the best, man. And look forward to talking to you off the air next time I'm in NOLA or you're in Lafayette.
That sounds great, man. It's been a true pleasure. Look, we've been knowing each other for 7.5 years now, so it's a long time of just doing shows together and watching sporting events with each other. And man, you are truly one of the best. And I wish you nothing but the best luck for you and your family and your new adventure. And look, I can't wait to send you a bunch of Parks and Recs gifts.
Yeah, so. Dude, you're not the first person that's told me that. A bunch of people were. I have a friend of mine named Seth Johnson. He used to come on the show many years ago. He lived here, and he's just like, he immediately started sending me some gifts. So I might have to watch the show. I hear it's great, loaded with people I like. I might just have to start watching it just so that I can interact with the gifts and understand them all. And going in that line of work, I just feel like it would make sense. People are like, "What, are you going to be Adam Scott? Are you going to be Chris Pratt?" I'm like, I haven't seen the show, but I'll pick one at some point.
You're an Adam Scott to me, yeah.
I love Adam Scott, by the way. I mean, Severance. How good was Severance? Come on.
It's on our list of shows we still got to take off our list. We're so far behind. We're so far behind.
Well, football season's over, man. Maybe after maybe after this Derek Carr stuff, you'll have a moment to breathe.
Doubtful, man.
All the best, dude. I gotta hang up now and do that abrupt goodbye. But I appreciate you, man, and I'll talk to you down the line.
Yeah, man. Always a pleasure. Talk to you soon.
You got it. That is Luke Johnson at @Luke Johnson on Twitter. BY Luke Johnson. Give him a follow. Check out all of his stuff.